Born in the city of Yako, in a country then known as Upper Volta, Thomas Sankara's family life was one of relative privilege. His father was a gendarme, a military force formed from the native people of Upper Volta, used to keep other natives under the control of their French colonial masters. Sankara, from an early age, probably hated this fact. A young Sankara was constantly getting into fights with the sons of white civil servants and colonial officers in the city of Gao, where he grew up. Ernest Harsh, writing a biography of his life, says that when he was 11, just a few days before Upper Volta was officially independent from France, Thomas was part of a group of boys who took down the French flag in town and raised the new flag of the Upper Volta in its place. When his father was ordered by an angry headmaster to discipline Thomas, he declined. This was unusual. Sankara the elder was often thrashing his son for such acts of ill discipline and defiance. But even Thomas's father had had enough of the old masters. Restless from an early age, Thomas Sankara was always clashing with his parents. They wanted him to be a Catholic priest. He had eyes for action. So it was that in 1966, at the tender age of 17, Sankara said a definite no to the sheltered life offered by the priesthood and chose instead to join the army. But Sankara had only half the heart of a soldier. You see, the perfect soldier carries out orders and doesn't question them. Some might say the perfect soldier is a man without a soul. Sankara was not this. His soul possessed him, and only one half of that soul was a soldier. The other was that of a thinker. Sankara never stopped thinking. He never ceased to question, and the question of what was right and what was wrong followed his restless mind wherever he went. Like when he was stationed in Madagascar, training to be an officer at the age of 20. There, Sankara saw how a people dissatisfied with neocolonialism could rise up successfully and take the reins of power. Just like in Upper Volta, the government of Madagascar had recently gained independence from the French. But off the record, it was still tied to France's wishes and desires. Madagascar had a puppet government, and so the Malagzi people rose up. Philipart Siranana's government fell. Watching on, Sankara was doing what the perfect soldier was not supposed to do. He was thinking for himself. Reading Karl Marx and the wide array of political philosophers, he took an interest in agriculture and the hard-working nature of the common African. Sankara's conclusion seemed to be that there was nothing common about the African. In 1974, he fought in a border war between his country and Mali and became an overnight celebrity for his performance in the war. But again, Sankara was thinking. We know this because years later he would denounce this war as, quote, useless and unjust. Now, not many soldiers look back on the wars that made them national heroes and condemn them as pointless. Shams and rackets meant to make rich men richer and powerful men more powerful. Thomas Sankara was one of the few. After the war, Sankara carried on in the military, rising through the ranks rapidly. He was made commander of a commando training center in the city of Polk, near the border with Ghana. And in 1981, under the presidency of Sayas Ervo, he became a minister of information. Sankara had only turned 31, and he was already a cabinet minister. During 100 miles an hour and still accelerating, Sankara's life was going to need another lane. The fast lane was clearly too slow, and yet while others rode into work in the Mercedes convoys, he bicycled into work. Sankara walked with kings and never lost the common touch. He was a major government minister, yet in his spare time he played in a jazz band called Tuda Kupjas and rode his bicycle everywhere. On a continent where the size of your private jet is the mark of your rank, Sankara the army captain, Sankara the cabinet minister, preferred a bicycle. This was in stark contrast to his closest friend, a Mani had sworn an oath of secrecy within 1976 as part of a secretive group of young officers called the Communist Officers Group. This man was placed comparably, who loved wealth and opulence and felt that official power should come with its rewards. Surely friendship with Sankara would have been like mixing water with oil. Not so. Sankara had the knack for walking with crowds while maintaining his virtue. This virtue was demonstrated with fearlessness when he resigned in 1982 from the government of Sayas Ervo. Why? Sankara believed in freedom of the press even when it hurt the government. Sayas Ervo did not. Malio Asieki Balyoni people was Sankara's parting shot to the president. Misfortune to go to gag the people. These were not ideal words from a part-time musician who fancied himself a poet. This was a curse. Sias Ervo was ousted by Major Dr. John Baptist Ouedraogo in 1982, and Sankara was appointed prime minister shortly after. An acceptance by the new regime of how popular a political figure Sankara had become. The question now was, with a second crack at power, would Sankara be a little more compromising? Let us say diplomatic. We probably wouldn't know his name today if you had chosen that path. Rather, Guy Martin writes that Sankara was busy traveling to countries like Libya, countries hostile to the West and the old colonial powers that held his country in their grip. Sankara was courting on approved support and making friends where he was not supposed to, for he had long realized the ulterior motives of the Western world in Africa and was therefore suspicious of Europe and America. His invitation to Colonel Gaddafi to visit Upper Volta in 1983 seemed to have been the last straw for my leveling eyes watching on. Guy Martin, Ideology and Praxis, writes, Colonel Jorian Somme met the French president's special advisor on Africa, Guy Pen, who flew into Ouagadougou on 15th May. Following this meeting in the French ambassador's residence, it was decided that Captain Sankara should be arrested along with other supporters. Indeed, Captain Sankara and most of his key supporters were rounded up. This would not be the first time the French would move around puppets on an African stage, and it would not be the last time they would try to control Sankara's fate. But this time round, a higher power was looking out for Africa's man of the hour. Sankara's friend Blaise Compaoré had escaped arrest. Some managed to reach the garrison at Po, where Sankara had great support from his days there as commanding officer. Riling the men in support for Sankara, Compaoré demanded Sankara's release, threatening to march on the capital otherwise. President Ouedraogo, like a day in the headlights, a fly caught in a web larger than he could comprehend, obliged. In the fighting that followed, Colonel Jorian Somme, with whose help the French had orchestrated Sankara's arrest, was killed. On the 4th of August 1983, Thomas Sankara became president of OPOV, was like none other. First, it was led by an accidental revolutionary. So far as we know, Thomas Sankara wasn't seeking power. He wasn't a man looking to outmaneuver this or that political opponent, or enrich himself and fill up the coffers of a secret Swiss bank account. Judging by his actions while he was in the political wings, he wanted only the best for his country. But now that he was president, he was going to laugh his way to the bank and rest his army boots firmly on the head of the upper vaulting. No, not this time. See, Thomas Sankara has been painted by many as a communist. This is a nonsensical labor which in the past has proven very useful for Europe and America, particularly when both sought to dethrone foreign leaders that took control of their country's resources to the detriment of Western corporate interests. The truth, like it often is, was in the gray areas. You can find it in Sankara's words, his actions, and in his country's historical context. First are words, quote, "The salvation of our peoples and our development require a total break with the worn-out models which all kind of quacks have tried to force on us during the last 20 years." End quote. Sankara clearly rejected the labels of Marxist, communist, even socialist. Quote, "Nowhere do we aim to build socialism in Burkina today," close quote. He once said, again, quote, "We are building a democratic modern society according to its economic content. Our revolution is a bourgeois revolution. It does not aim at the elimination of private property or private economic initiative and entrepreneurship." End quote. This last was untrue in the short term, because for Sankara's government to deliver economically, it had to take back control of land and resources in a country's